My paper is going to be about Jakob Augstein's anti-Semitic slurs and the change of discourse on Jews and Israel in Germany. I think that the last days made clear why talking about conceptions of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is not just discourse, but is highly relevant and necessary precondition for successful action. Definitions and understandings of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism translate into policies and regulations. They find their ways into educational programs and school books, classrooms, as we learned yesterday. They render certain actions and thoughts possible. So the dominant understandings of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism will structure, limit, direct our thinking, talking, and acting in respect to Jews and Israel. I will try to contribute to this discussion by looking at the public discourse about Jews and Israel in Germany that has changed over the last years, and I will identify certain arguments that we as scholars aiming to fight anti-Semitism and Zionism are confronted with. As it is somewhat hard to grasp the change of discourse, I will illustrate it by outlining a debate over the Simon Wiesenthal Center's top 10 list of anti-Semitic slurs 2012. With some years' distance, it is easier to see that the discussion is a milestone in the slow change of discourse on Jews and Israel in Germany. Other than Germans who made it on the Wiesenthal Center's list the years before, the 2012 ranking caused a major discussion, a public outcry, you could say, because it was no notorious right-winger who made it on the list, but this likable man. His name is Jakob Augstein, and I would like to say, now that you heard his name, you may forget it, but I'm afraid that it's not true, because his influence on public opinion shouldn't be underestimated. His legal father is Rudolf Augstein, founder of the most influential weekly magazine Der Spiegel, and in 2009, Jakob Augstein announced that his biological father is Martin Walser, one of the most influential German intellectuals and writers, and maybe best known in this room for a speech in 1998 in which he criticized the instrumentalization of the Holocaust as a political tool used against the Germans. Jakob Augstein owns parts of the Spiegel publishing house, meaning he's a multimillionaire. He's the editor and publisher of the weekly newspaper Der Freitag. He writes a column for the print edition as well as the web edition of Der Spiegel. He seems likable, knows how to talk, and therefore he is a regular guest in talk shows. The title of his weekly column, which was quoted then by the Wiesenthal Center, is Im Zweifel links, which doesn't make too much sense in German and roughly translates into in case of doubt, I stand on the left. He's a respected member of the intellectual media elite. Now, what happened? The Wiesenthal Center put Augstein on the top 10 anti-Semitic / anti-Israel slurs 2012, together with, among others, the Iranian regime, the Hungarian Jobbik Party, a Brazilian cartoonist. So, I'm pretty sure you know how the list looks like still. I got it here. So the list includes individuals, political parties, regimes, but also groups of people such as European soccer fans who are on the list for anti-Semitic chanting. I believe that if you take a look at the list and think about the intention, you will soon get the idea that the list is supposed to draw attention to the widespread of anti-Semitism, meaning geographically, but also meaning in respect to the diverse forms that anti-Semitism can take. So let's take a closer look at Augstein's quotes, which won him the 9th place on the list. We will have a look at only 2 of the quotes because I think that's really enough to get an idea. The first quote, let me see. Yeah. With backing from the US, he writes, where the president must secure the support of Jewish lobby groups, and in Germany, where coping with history in the meantime has a military component, the Netanyahu government keeps the world on a leash with an ever-swelling war chant. So first of all, if you look into the original article, you will find that in the sentence following this quote, Augstein refers to an article which he believes does prove his point. And it will come as no surprise at all that the article he quotes is from Haaretz, and the author is Gideon Levy, who was introduced yesterday. So the argument is, I think you know that, but especially in Germany it's very strong. So Augstein makes the argument against Israel, and then he's referring to an Israeli, and then the argument goes, if even a Jewish, I mean he must be Jewish Israeli says what I says, I mean then I must be right. So in general, it is hard to interpret short pieces of writings because there is a wider context. There's a political situation, you need to know the political culture of countries, and you need to know the speech codes. You need to know them to be able to decipher anti-Semitism in general. Now, in the case of Augstein, it's not that hard. Augstein combines several core elements of anti-Semitism. He stresses the topic of Jewish world dominance and Jewish influence. The most powerful man in the world must secure the support of the Jewish lobby groups, means that he has to conform to their political aims. Now, the president needs to secure the support of a lot of groups, and among others, the Jewish lobby groups. But that is absolutely not the image we get here. The image he presents is that Israel, together with its branch offices in the US, the Jewish lobby groups, is keeping the US, Germany, and the whole world on a leash. And this phrase means to give somebody little freedom to do what he wants. This image doesn't connect with anti-Semitic images, it is an anti-Semitic image. The US is a superpower and Germany has become the European hegemonial power. Claiming these powers are controlled, so led on a leash, is simply irrational. But the argument works. It works, it is understood by his readers, because the image of Jewish dominance is cultural knowledge. If you grow up in a Western society, you know these images. Augstein's argument works because what he claims is already accepted and known. The second aspect here is Augstein's cryptical reference to Germany's coming to terms with its past. What he's obviously referring to here is Chancellor Merkel, who said in the Knesset in 2008 that Germany's responsibility for Israel's safety has become part of Germany's reason of state. It is needless to say that Augstein doesn't agree. He has been slamming German governments, the Social Democrats as well as the Conservatives, for delivering submarines to Israel that have the capability to launch nuclear missiles. For Augstein, that is a betrayal of German interests. Quote, "When Israel is concerned," he writes, "there are no more rules. Politics, law, economy, whenever Jerusalem calls, Berlin bows to its will." Quote end. So the image he paints is that the Germans have a bad conscience about the Holocaust, so now they do whatever pleases Israel. And Israel, on the other hand, exploits the Germans' bad conscience, asks for whatever it needs, and gets it. In short, Israel profits and uses the Holocaust to pressure Germany. Now, it will come as no surprise that Augstein agrees with Günter Grass, who stated in a poem in 2012 that Israel is a threat to world peace. I mean, he called it a poem. I don't see how it does fit in that category, but that's another discussion. Israel's nuclear power is a danger to the already fragile peace of the world. This statement has triggered an outcry because it is true, and because it was made by a German, Günter Grass, author and Nobel Prize winner. That is the key point. One must therefore thank him for taking it up in himself to speak for us all. Quote end. As in Grass' poem, not Iran's nuclear program and the fact that Iranian leadership takes every chance to announce that it will wipe Israel off the map is considered a threat, but it is Israel who is a threat to world peace. The surprising fact Augstein presents is, without Israel's nuclear power, so what he means is Israel's assumed possession of nuclear arms, world peace would not be in danger. That is what he's saying. And I mean, which world peace? I mean, what is this man talking about? This really is highly irrational, and it is a demonization of Israel. Now, for the sake of the argument, let's assume you don't care about Israel. Then as a left-winger, you might still want to point at the countless and nameless victims in places of this world no one cares about. There was a time when this was at the very center of left-wing identity, and I think for a good reason. But Augstein is looking at the world through Western eyes and doesn't see the victims of the many conflicts in Africa. And that is why he can't can write what he wrote, because only when you're ignoring ongoing conflicts with the many dead, you can claim that only Israel is endangering world peace. And it does tell you something about Augstein's worldview, that other conflicts between India and Pakistan or between North and South Korea are not mentioned at all, and I checked, until today he didn't write a single column of one of these conflicts. Now, what is more interesting for my argument here is how Augstein presents himself and how he presents Günter Grass. He says, Grass' statement triggered an outcry because it is true. Now, this only makes sense if we consider that what has been said is a taboo. So what exactly is tabooed? Grass said something that is true but cannot be said. So it is the truth that is being tabooed. So we have to ask, who stops us from speaking the truth? Well, we don't exactly know here, but we can read between the lines and we know who leads the world on a leash. But Grass didn't just cause an outcry for telling the truth, but he caused an outcry for telling it even so he is German. And as a German, and that is the subtext here that is really not very hard to decipher, he cannot freely speak his mind about Israel. And that is secondary anti-Semitism. Because of historical guilt, the Germans cannot speak their mind, not even the truth, and if one does, one is being censored and silenced by the media cartel. That is what Grass, in the poem, and following him Augstein in this column, are writing. So, but then we are at the point where we have to ask, like, is criticizing Israel really tabooed in Germany? I mean, the best thing for answering the question is to look at the numbers. A 2011 survey found that between 40 and 50% of Germans believe that Jews are using the past for their benefits. Between 60 and 70% say they are angry that they are still charged for the crimes against Jews during World War II. And a 2003 study, a bit older, financed by the European Commission, found that 65% of Germans find that Israel is a threat to world peace. Back then, that was not really popular finding, so the European Commission was holding it back for some time. And I mean, somehow we know these numbers, but let's take a moment to think about what that means, because 65% of Germans when interviewed on the telephone. And that means a situation in which you are talking to a real person. And this means it is a situation in which it is much more likely that people blanch from giving answers that they think are socially not accepted. Still, in a situation where they interviewed on the telephone, 65% name Israel as the biggest threat to world peace. That are the attitudes of regular Germans. So when Grass and Augstein say that they are breaking a taboo, then in a very weird way they are right. Because officials are struggling hard to present Germany as a nation that has come to terms with its past. Part of that is that Germany is by constitution not a liberal but a militant democracy that is aiming to guarantee that the opinions expressed in public have to meet certain standards. Gilad Margalit wrote that dealing with Jewish issues was so sensitive in post-war Germany that it was first and foremost regarded as a political matter. Consequently, it was handled rather cautiously in the German media. Now, the Augstein case clearly shows that this cautiousness is definitely over. What we witness is a clash of public opinion with the official pro-Israel rhetoric. And the role of Augstein and others is that they give those 65% of Germans who believe that Israel is a threat to world peace a voice. Thereby they refine the borders of what can be said. Augstein and others are making the most irrational and demonizing attitudes towards Israel acceptable opinions. What they are breaking is the ever-fragile taboo of anti-Semitism in public space. And we are talking about anti-Semitism here because there sure is no taboo of criticizing Israel in Germany. Much on the contrary, Israel receives enormous coverage and the reporting is very critical of Israel. So what we can see is that the dominant understanding is that anti-Semitism is the hatred against Jews, and that more or less every opinion expressed towards Israel can maybe be critical of Israel, but can by definition not be anti-Semitic. And this is something I want to prove by having a look at how the decision of the Wiesenthal Center to put Augstein on the list was received in public, because you could say, okay, this is Augstein, who cares? But how did the public, how did the media elite react to that? After the list was published in December 2012, it was drawing major attention, and we find journalists, scientists, politicians commenting on it. The list was criticized for putting Augstein next to the Iranian regime and making him one of the worst, one of the 10 worst anti-Semites in the world. I think it's obvious why this is a misreception. But based on this reception, it was easy to slam the Wiesenthal Center. Jan Fleischhauer, a columnist at Spiegel Online, paradigmatically argues that the whole story is absurd and that the Wiesenthal Center was just fishing for attention. And Fleischhauer asks, quote, "Should I really take this whole case serious? Should I assume that Augstein believes that the Jews are evil, and the next time that I am at Augstein's place for dinner, will I have to check his bookshelf for copies of the Protocols of the Eldony of Zion, or a copy of Mein Kampf?" Quote end. Now, what I find striking about this reaction is not so much that he sides with Augstein. I mean, he's working for Augstein. But if you look at the quotes just for a minute, then that should be enough to ask yourself a few questions. Augstein uses metaphors that identify Jews as powerful, manipulating, using the Holocaust for their benefit, and that is just two quotes. Fleischhauer and the vast majority of those commenting the case didn't see these metaphors as problematic, nor did they find them problematic by content. But Fleischhauer unwillingly gives an explanation for not seeing the problem with Augstein's slurs. Anti-Semites are people who demonize Jews and adore Hitler. And if this is the definition of anti-Semitism, then there is no question about when anti-Israel statements are anti-Semitic, because they can't be. Nor can statements be anti-Semitic that demonize, delegitimize Israel, or that apply double standards. Frank Drieschner of the liberal Die Zeit asks, quote, "So which crime is Augstein charged with? It is hard to believe, but what he wrote is nothing more but trivial conclusions." Quote end. And Christian Bomarius argues in the Social Democratic Frankfurter Rundschau that, quote, "Augstein did not insult the Jewish people or the state of Israel. He didn't advocate annihilation or expulsion." Quote end. Lucky Jews. What Fleischhauer, Drischer, and Bomarius are advocating is an understanding of anti-Semitism that is so narrow that it's impossible to detect anti-Semitic codes or even look at the motivation of people who put so much energy into making Israel a rogue state. Next to the strategy of narrowing the term of anti-Semitism, there is two other reactions that I would like to highlight, because I think they're already strong and they will get stronger in the next years. First one is the accusation that the Wiesenthal Center was devaluating the term anti-Semitism by applying it to someone who in truth is no anti-Semite at all. And again, of course the term anti-Semitism is applied to people who are not anti-Semitic, because there is no agency that regulates the use of the term, so if you feel like it, you can use it. But I would say this is single cases. However, what we witness more and more often is that there is an increase of Antisemitismusvorwürfe, so accusations of anti-Semitism, as many call them. And what these people normally mean is that the term is used more and more, and that this implicates that it is used unjustified. But that is not true, I would say, because we have the numbers and we know what are the attitudes of Germans towards Israel. And this is why it would be rational to assume that the rise of openly expressed anti-Semitism in public is the reason for the increase of the so-called accusations of anti-Semitism. But again, the answer of the journalists that are defending Augstein is no. Drieschner in Die Zeit says, quote, "Everywhere in the world, people are criticizing nuclear arms. Only when you raise concern against the only power in the region in the possession of nuclear arms, then you must be an anti-Semite." Quote end. And I'm sure that everybody of us has heard arguments like that because they're easy to make. It is obvious that Drieschner has not had a look at Augstein's column, because then he would have realized that Augstein is not on the list for protesting against Israel's nuclear capability, and therefore his argument in defense of Augstein is completely off the point. But the argument he puts forward is a big problem for those fighting anti-Semitism, because he says, if you apply the term anti-Semitism to people like Augstein, you are devaluating the term. So he doesn't deny that anti-Semitism is a problem, but he also wants it limited to cases in which the anti-Semitic content is obvious, meaning anti-Semitic in a way that anti-Semitism presented itself a long time ago. The other argument that was used to defend Augstein is one we hear more and more often. It is the argument that anti-Semitism is used as a political weapon with the means to silence those who criticize Israel. Stefan Reinecke of the left-wing Tageszeitung argues that, quote, instead of participating in a rational debate, the Wiesenthal Center is using the weapon of denunciation, quote end. So who are they using it against? Reinecke says, quote, those who criticize Israel are being shot at with the anti-Semitism pump gun, quote end. You can really write a book about the metaphors used in this debate. The image is lively and clear. You are being shot at, and the shooter doesn't care if he or she hits other people as well as he or she is using a pump gun. And Reinecke then highlights the dramatic consequences of the denunciation. Quote, those who are marked as anti-Semites cannot participate in public discourse, quote end. And for a journalist, that means social death and hence financial bankruptcy. Now, there is much more to say about this debate, and you may talk to Matthias Künzel, who also participated in the debate and who took a very important role of speaking out against Augstein and siding with the Wiesenthal Center. Let me finish by concluding. What we witnessed over the last 15 years is that less and less anti-Semitic remarks are sanctioned in public, and therefore the standards of what can be said about Jews in Israel is shifting. The Augstein debate shows that it's not so much anti-Semitism that is considered the biggest problem, but the increase of unjustified accusations of anti-Semitism. Anti-Israel remarks are left unsanctioned because the anti-Israel resentment and metaphors are not considered anti-Semitic, but a legitimate form of criticizing Israel. And as a result of that, the ones who do criticize anti-Israel resentment as being anti-Semitic are being identified as aggressors, opponents of free speech, who use anti-Semitism as a political weapon to silence others in public discourse. And that is, and I think we've heard that on a conference before, that is a big problem, and we will have to find a way to deal with it. Thank you.